California legislature just passed a bill that will punish doctors and other medical professionals for spreading purportedly false information about COVID-19 vaccines and treatments. Why is this happening now? Why is this happening now? Because I don't think this is about COVID-19 vaccines and treatments. This is a doorway. So wait a minute. So if my doctor says, listen, I don't trust that COVID-19 vaccine, I wouldn't take it. You know what? I'm gonna recommend you do this. They can lose their license. So we have the state telling you or telling your doctor what he can or cannot say about a product that the state is a co-owner in. That's not good. I want to give you just a little refresher course on our founder. 1798, I think, is the Sedition Act. Sedition Act was finally pulled and found invalid, but it caused a real problem and a real debate the first time it was introduced. Now, Woodrow Wilson brought it up again, but the first time it was used was during our second president, John Adams. And so the debate became, wait a minute. Just because they're saying something about the state or you, Mr. Adams, or you, Mr. Jefferson, you think that the First Amendment doesn't allow you to have those charges brought up against you? Well, but these people know it's not true. So this amazing debate happened. I invite you to look this up. The debate was all around whether or not the state has a right to tell you what's true and what is not. And the founders came to a place to where they said, and I'm practically quoting, if you can help me remember this at all, Stu, but I'm practically quoting where they said, look, if a person decides he's just going to be the worst person in the world and he has no scruples, no moorings to anything ethical or moral, and he decides to make up the worst things that are known lies and he knows it, we cannot say that he gets jail time or he needs to be shut up. Because of why? Do you remember, Stu?
Because the government can't be the arbiter of truth.
Why?
Because the government could be at the other end of a claim, right? And then if they're the ones that are determining the truth, then you can't accuse them of anything because they can always say, well, my side is right.
Correct.
So you can't put it in their hands.
And they went as far as saying, look, this is like if you have, and they talked about it in their time because Adams and Jefferson went at each other. And so the Democrats and the Whigs were at each other's throats, just like now. And
the Whigs, not a huge presence these days, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So they were at each other's throats. And they said, look, in a situation like we're in right now, where it's 50-50, and one side doesn't believe the other side, you put something on trial to decide what's true. What happens if you get all Whigs in there, or a majority of Whigs, or you get a majority of Democrats? They're not going to be able to give a fair trial because they see the truth differently. Now think of this. Having a trial for anybody in Washington, D.C., anyone who is a Trump supporter in Washington, D.C., are you going to get a fair trial? I don't think so. That's why the government can't decide truth. They can play no role in that. California is deciding what the truth is. Now, California has been at some of the center of squashing the truth and lying to you. They're using COVID-19 as an example of that they should be the ones that tell you what's true and what's not. California, I don't even recognize sanity with you anymore. There's no logic to this at all. But warning, it is coming. It's coming in California. And if California adopts something, wait until you see how many others do. By the way, another story on this. I was sued, how many years ago, Stu?
You have to narrow it down.
I was sued like 10 years ago for something that I knew was true because I had the documents from a source inside of Washington. And this was a very, very credible source. And he was in the position to know what was true and what was not in Homeland Security because it all went through his hands. But he couldn't be outed. So I couldn't say who it was. And I asked him several times, will you please testify? I can't, or I lose the access, so I can't. Okay. So I took it. But I had the documents, and they were not redacted. And I went to the judge, and I said, these are the documents. And she said, well, how did you get them? And I said, from a source. Who's your source? I can't tell you that. Then we can't tell you if these documents are right or not. I said, then tell the government to produce these documents. We had like 6 White House attorneys show up at the next hearing. 6. I had 1. 6. And they told the judge to her face, we're not giving you these documents. They're privileged documents. We're not giving you these documents. She said, well, you're going to turn them over. And they said, no, we're not. And they left. It was over. And then they didn't produce the documents. And so she calls them again and says, you are going to produce these documents. So they did. 300 pages fully redacted. You could have the ifs, the ands, the buts, but almost everything else. I mean, it made Donald Trump's affidavit look like the encyclopedia.
And what was interesting about that is it wasn't like they were hiding what was in the documents because you had the unredacted documents.
Correct.
So like it was just all they needed to do was confirm whether these were real or not.
Correct.
And they intentionally redacted everything so you couldn't tell.
I even went to the judge, or my attorney did, and said, okay, see on the bottom of the lens? See how it says page, 301? Okay, turn to page 301. Notice the ands, the ifs, the buts are all in exactly the same place. Right. What are the odds of that? Wouldn't accept it. You cannot win against the government if they can claim secrecy, privilege, if they hold all the cards, which they do. This is why we developed the Constitution, because these are the things that the king was doing to our founders. That's why that document is so genius. But the further we get away from that document, the more in peril you are.